this is asking too much from me. I have no idea how could I ever pull this off.
We've probably all been at a point where we caught ourselves thinking one of these statements or similar versions. Well, at least if you're listening to this podcast, because if you haven't, your confidence must be really strong. Like when we're talking about stress, confidence is also a very common concept that we talk about in our daily life.
Okay, so I use this a lot, but I'm still unaware how to define it. What actually is it when we say that we are confident?
All right, maybe before we get into this, take a moment to think about it yourself. Like, how would you define confidence? What is confidence to you? Now, I'll assume you took a moment, maybe wrote some ideas down. Maybe you have something like feeling good about yourself, or something like believing in yourself, or maybe believing in your ability to do specific things like racing in a highly competitive event. Generally, when we are thinking about confidence, we're often referring to it as almost like a personality trait. You either have it or you don't. But ask yourself the question, is that really the truth? See, confidence is a bit tricky and a complex term. While there is general self-confidence that we consider to be a trait, there is also confidence in relation to specific tasks like racing in an event or training with the intention to improve your racing times. This specific confidence is called self-efficacy and can vary greatly between different tasks. So, for example, you might feel confident about your training and the ability to stick to a tricky routine, but might not feel confident about doing well in an actual race. This would mean you have high self-efficacy for training, but low self-efficacy for racing.
All right, I definitely have a better understanding of it now. So, how does this matter for my performance though?
Well, have you ever felt self-doubts before an event or a specific race? Do you do well in that event after you were struggling, or do you just kind of crumble under the tension? Just take a moment to think about this. Maybe you have some examples in mind with things that happened to you. So research generally shows that having high self-efficacy is associated with more positive emotions, improved concentration, and increased effort to reach your own goals. With these effects, self-efficacy has been related to performance improvements, or if you're not so high in self-efficacy on your desired task, reductions in performance. Essentially, you'll only be able to reach peak performance if you actually believe you can. So confidence is highly important to your performance, but now comes the funny part about confidence. Before making my point, I also like to ask you to recall a match that you've witnessed when an underdog competes with a pro athlete. All eyes are on the pro athlete because for the audience, it's just a one-sided match. But then the underdog spikes the victory. Ever wondered why that happens? It's because, like stress, with confidence, it can be a friend, but it can also be your enemy. So in situations like those, the pro athlete tends to get overconfident, and that might lead in a drop in performance because their stress levels in relation to their performance are not very high. And as we were talking about this in the last podcast, stress can be really good for performance. So when we're getting overconfident, stress is so low because we're so sure we're going to win that our performance actually drops. If one example for a similar kind of situations is the fight between Conor McGregor and Khabib, where all the eyes were on McGregor, and McGregor was very overconfident about his victory, but Khabib actually left with a remarkable victory.
Wow, okay. So how can I use this in my sport? Like, how can I build my confidence?
There are a number of ways to build confidence that have all shown to be effective. However, one of the most important strategies is probably practice. The more you do something, the more confidence you feel in it, right? Think about the first time you sat on a bike. You might have been very young, but still, you probably didn't feel very confident about it. That confidence probably came with time once you had tried to ride a bike again and again and again. This is the same principle that applies to all other abilities as well. The reason we feel less confident about performance situations like races is not only because the pressure is on, but also because we don't get as much experience with races as we maybe do with training. This is the reason why people do mock races. They're simulating the actual race to practice the ability to perform under such conditions. This is how you build confidence to perform in such situations. So whatever ability it is you're struggling with, try to practice it as much as you can. Talking about practice, there's another way to build performance as well, which also heavily relies on practicing. This is positive self-talk and the skill we'll be teaching in the workshops. Essentially, what you do when you perform self-talk is that you think about some aspects of the task you want to perform and develop phrases that relate to it. These should be relatively short, so we're not asking you to rehearse a paragraph or script. It's mostly just keywords and short phrases that you can use in training, and once you feel comfortable with them, even in competitions, you can then use them. But we'll go more into detail about how exactly you develop such keywords and phrases in the workshop, so stay tuned for those. One more important thing to remember is that these are skills that require practice, so they're not Harry Potter magic spells. They're not going to change your life from one day to the next. So the only way for these skills to help you is persistence. You should try to make it a part of your daily life rather than just a technique you use when you feel low in confidence. So that way they can be the most efficient. But for now, thank you very much for listening to this podcast. We hope you've learned something about confidence, and we're looking forward to seeing you in your workshops.